Kiri's supernatural abilities in Avatar, Fire and Ash have left fans questioning everything they thought they knew about Eywa's connection to Pandora. Today we're exploring every aspect of Kiri's extraordinary abilities, from their mysterious origins to their world-changing implications, revealing why she might be the key to everything that happens next in James Cameron's epic saga. Here's Kiri's powers completely explained. Kiri's abilities stem from her unprecedented origin story, and because she was born from Dr. Grace Augustine's inert avatar body after Grace's soul failed to fully transfer into the avatar at the Tree of Souls. Her very existence represents something that has never happened before in Na'vi history. There was never a known biological father for Kiri, leading to the widespread assumption that Eywa herself intervened during or after Grace's failed transfer to conceive Kiri inside the Avatar body. This makes Kiri unique as a hybrid that transcends normal human and Na'vi genetics, creating something entirely new in Cameron's universe. What makes this origin so significant is that Kiri represents the perfect fusion of Grace's scientific curiosity and personality traits with the physical form of a Na'vi avatar. But she also carries direct influence from Eywa that goes beyond normal spiritual connection. Since Grace's consciousness was attempting to merge with Eywa at the moment of her death, and because Kiri was conceived during this process, she essentially became a living vessel for part of the planetary consciousness itself. The implications of this origin become clear when we examine how Kiri's spiritual sensitivity operates compared to other Na'vi characters. Since normal Na'vi require neural links through their cues to connect with Eywa and experience the planetary network, they have limited access to the spiritual realm and must use specific rituals and locations to achieve deeper connections. Kiri, however, speaks about feeling Eywa constantly as a living presence, hearing her like an ongoing conversation rather than occasional spiritual experiences. This constant connection manifests in ways that seem impossible to other characters, and because Kiri can sense and communicate with Eywa without any physical interface, her abilities represent a completely different level of spiritual evolution. She doesn't just visit the network, she lives within it, making her consciousness partially exist in both the physical and spiritual realms simultaneously. The underwater sequence in The Way of Water provides our first clear demonstration of Kiri's extraordinary abilities. And since she can command sea life and bioluminescent organisms with apparent ease, the scene reveals that her powers extend far beyond simple spiritual sensitivity. When Kiri turns the ocean into both a weapon and a flashlight, directing schools of fish and controlling bioluminescent creatures to protect and guide her family, she's demonstrating a level of environmental control that no other Na'vi has ever achieved. What makes this scene particularly significant is how effortless Kiri's control appears. Because her connection to Eywa is natural rather than learned, Kiri's abilities flow from her as easily as breathing, suggesting that she's accessing powers that are fundamentally part of her being rather than external forces she's manipulating. The sea creatures respond to her not because she's commanding them, but because she's communicating with them through the planetary network in ways that feel like natural conversation. However, this same connection that gives Kiri her incredible abilities also creates her most dangerous vulnerability. And since her nervous system is wired directly from other Na'vi, she experiences intense seizures when connecting to high-intensity Eywa nodes, like the Tree of Souls or underwater spirit trees. The seizure she suffered when connecting to the underwater spirit tree and seeing Grace wasn't just a random medical event. It was her consciousness being overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information and spiritual energy flowing through the connection. This creates a tragic irony, where the closer Kiri gets to her full potential, the more she risks destroying herself in the process. Because her brain and nervous system are essentially hybrid technology trying to process planetary-scale consciousness, every deep connection becomes a dangerous gamble where she might seize, black out, or even die from spiritual overload. Fire and Ash reportedly shows another moment where Kiri's connection almost kills her, and Moat has to intervene to break the link, proving that this isn't a problem she's outgrowing, but a fundamental limitation of her hybrid nature. The healing abilities that Fire and Ash explores represent perhaps the most profound aspect of Kiri's powers, and since she can channel Eywa's life energy directly through herself to repair damage that should be fatal, she's essentially functioning as a living conduit for the planetary consciousness's creative force. When Kiri heals Spider in ways that clearly go beyond normal Na'vi healing rituals, she's demonstrating that her connection to Eywa allows her to access the fundamental life force that animates all living things on Pandora. This healing ability connects directly to her origin as someone who is literally part Eywa, and because she can pull life energy directly from the source rather than just borrowing it temporarily. Kiri's healing represents a completely different category of power than anything we've seen before. If she can heal Spider from potentially fatal injuries, the implications for what else she might be able to accomplish are staggering. The battlefield applications of Kiri's abilities transform how conflicts work on Pandora, and since she can effectively reshape terrain by calling on plants, roots, and local wildlife, she turns environmental features into deliberate tactical advantages rather than random obstacles. When the Ash people bring fire, lava, and scorched landscapes into the conflict, Kiri's role becomes about balancing destruction with restoration, using her connection to Eywa to counter their devastating attacks with rapid regeneration and environmental healing. What makes Kiri particularly terrifying for enemies like Quatrich or General Ardmore is that she can make nature itself hostile to invasion forces, because she understands how to direct Eywa's planetary consciousness towards specific threats. Kiri can essentially point the entire ecosystem's defensive capabilities at particular targets. This means that fighting Kiri isn't just about facing one powerful individual. It's about confronting the combined might of Pandora's entire biosphere, working in coordinated opposition. Her relationship with Spider adds another crucial dimension to understanding Kiri's powers, and since their bond represents the potential bridge between humanity and Pandora, their connection might be the key to extending Eywa's influence beyond the moon itself. Spider, being human but raised Na'vi, and Kiri being Eywa's child in a Na'vi avatar body, together represent two halves of a bridge that could theoretically allow Eywa's consciousness to reach Earth and help restore its dying ecosystems. Fire and Ash reportedly leans into this possibility by giving Spider a major transformation arc that ties directly to Kiri's healing powers and his survival. Given that their bond becomes more than just a sibling connection and evolves into something politically and cosmically important, the film suggests that Kiri's abilities might not be limited to Pandora. If she can learn to extend Eywa's power through Spider to reach other worlds, the entire Avatar franchise suddenly shifts from save this moon to maybe save multiple planets. If you're fascinated by how James Cameron is expanding the mythology of Avatar through characters like Kiri and want to understand every detail of how her powers connect to the larger story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We're diving deep into all the connections and implications that make this franchise so compelling, and you won't want to miss what we discover next. The political and religious implications of Kiri's existence create complications that extend far beyond her personal journey. And now that she automatically becomes a religious and political problem for Pandora's different clans, her very presence challenges the traditional structure of Na'vi's spirituality. If the Na'vi start accepting that she's literally Eywa's child or chosen vessel, then traditional roles like Tahik, clan leaders, and even Toruk Makto suddenly need to be reevaluated around her presence. Kiri can't simply be another member of the Sully family when her existence challenges the entire framework of how Na'vi society understands spiritual authority. Because she has direct access to Eywa, rather than requiring intermediaries or rituals, her presence could unify clans by becoming a neutral spiritual center. Or it could accidentally spark schisms if different groups claim to interpret Eywa's intent through her differently. The fact that she's still a teenager with her own insecurities and traumas makes the prospect of being turned into a living religious symbol as much a burden as it is a source of power. The emotional and psychological costs of Kiri's abilities create vulnerabilities that enemies could potentially exploit. And because she's so deeply attuned to Eywa and the planetary network, every death, environmental wound, and moment of suffering risks hitting her much harder than it affects other people. This constant empathy can easily spiral into anxiety, depression, or paralysis when the world is literally on fire, as it is during the conflict with the Ash people and RDA forces. Her past traumas, Neteyam's death, feeling like an outsider in her own family, nearly dying during seizures, create a psychological minefield that sophisticated enemies could weaponize against her. Since breaking Kiri's resolve might be easier than confronting her powers directly, attacking her emotionally rather than physically could prove to be the most effective strategy for those who understand her nature. The fact that she cares so deeply about everyone around her makes her vulnerable to manipulation through threats to the people she loves. Physically, Kiri remains vulnerable despite her extraordinary abilities, and since she's still fundamentally a young Na'vi who can be killed by conventional weapons if caught off guard, her powers don't make her invulnerable. The seizure risk that accompanies her deepest connections to Eywa creates windows of vulnerability where she becomes completely helpless, and enemies who understand this pattern could potentially time their attacks to coincide with her spiritual connections. Even more troubling is the possibility that allies like Jake and Neytiri might limit how often Kiri is allowed to use her full abilities out of fear for her safety, considering the people who love her most are also the ones most terrified of losing her to seizures or spiritual overload. They might inadvertently hold her back from reaching her full potential. This creates a tragic situation where Kiri's greatest protection comes from the same people who might prevent her from becoming everything she's meant to be. Looking toward the future of the Avatar franchise, Kiri's powers position her to potentially become the central character of the remaining films. And since there are reports that Avatar 4 will feature her as the narrator, her perspective will likely drive the story in ways that fundamentally change how we understand Pandora and Eywa. Her voice would represent a unique combination of Na'vi wisdom, human scientific curiosity through Grace's influence, and direct divine insight through her connection to Eywa. Kiri's powers suggest that the Avatar universe is moving toward themes that transcend simple environmental protection and venture into questions about the nature of existence itself. Her abilities also set up potential storylines that could span multiple films. And since her powers are still evolving and her connection to Eywa continues deepening, future movies could explore how her abilities develop as she matures. The possibility that she could eventually extend Eywa's influence to other worlds opens up narrative possibilities that could take the franchise in completely new directions, while maintaining its core themes about the connection between all living things. If you want to stay updated on all the developments in Kiri's story and how her powers continue to shape the Avatar universe, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, and let me know in the comments what aspect of her abilities you find most fascinating. The journey into the true nature of consciousness and connection is just beginning, and Kiri is leading the way.